Saladin was the Muslim Sultan of Egypt and Syria who shocked the Western world by defeating an army of Christian Crusader states at the Battle of Hattin and then capturing Jerusalem in 1187. He destroyed the eastern Latin states in the Levant and successfully repelled the Third Crusade. From 1187 to 1192. Saladin achieved his success in unifying the Muslim Near East from Egypt to Arabia through a potent mixture of warfare, diplomacy, and the promise of holy war. Saladin's skills in warfare and politics, as well as his personal qualities of generosity and chivalry, resulted in him being praised by Christian and Muslim writers, so that he became one of the most famous figures of the Middle Ages. Welcome to the channel Myths and Curiosities, and come with us to know a little more about the life and legacy of Saladino, an amazing story. Already leave your like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any notification. Saladin, whose full name was al-Malik al-Nasir Salah al-Dunya Wildin Abu al-Muzaffar Yusuf ibn Ayyub ibn Shadi al-Kurdi, son of Ayyub, a displaced Kurdish mercenary, was born in 1137 in Takrit Castle north of Baghdad. Saladin would rise through the ranks of the armed forces, where he gained a reputation as a skilled knight and talented polo player. He followed his uncle Shirkuh on campaign, who conquered Egypt in 1169. Saladin then replaced his relative as governor of Egypt with Nur ad-Din, sometimes also given as Nur al-Din, independent governor of Aleppo and Edessa from 1146 to 1174. When Nur ad-Din died in May 1174, his coalition of Muslim states fell apart as his successors fought for supremacy. Saladin claimed that he was the true heir and took Egypt for himself. Saladin, now the Sultan of Egypt, repeated Nur ad-Din's feat in Syria when he captured Damascus in 1174. Saladin claimed to be the protector of Egypt, and his removal of the Shiite Caliph in Cairo and organization of his state in accordance with strict Islamic law gave to this statement a serious weight. Saladin then set about unifying the Muslim world, or at least forming some form of useful coalition, no easy task given the many states, independent rulers and differences in the religious beliefs of Sunni and Shia Muslims. Saladin's strategy was a potent mixture of war and diplomacy mixed with the idea that he and he alone could wage a holy war against the Christian settlers in the Middle East who formed Latin states like the Kingdom of Jerusalem. First, though, the military leader also had no qualms about waging war against his Muslim enemies. In 1175, for example, an army of a rival in Aleppo was defeated by him in Hama. Saladin's supremacy among Muslim leaders was cemented when Sunni Orthodoxy, the Caliph of Baghdad, head of the Sunni faith, formally recognized him as governor of Egypt, Syria, and Yemen. Unfortunately, Aleppo remained independent and, ruled by the son of Nur ad-Din, a serious thorn in Saladin's diplomatic side. There were more personal risks, too, as the Sultan of Egypt twice survived attempts on his life by the assassins, a powerful Shia section. Saladin responded immediately by attacking the assassins' castle in Masyaf, Syria, and looting the surrounding area. Meanwhile, the diplomatic route was also followed, most notably in marriage to Nur ad-Din's widow Ismet, also a daughter of the late Damascus ruler Unur. Thus, Saladin easily associated himself with two ruling dynasties at once. Along the way there were setbacks such as defeat to the Franks, as Western settlers were known, most notably at Montjazard in 1177, but victories in 1179 at Marj Ayan and the capture of a large fortress on the Jordan River illustrated Saladin's intent to rid the Middle East completely of Westerners. Also helpful to Saladin was his growing reputation for justice and generosity, and Saladin's carefully cultivated image as the defender of Islam against rival religions, especially Christianity. Saladin's position was strengthened in May 1183 when he captured Aleppo and by his prudent construction of a very useful Egyptian naval fleet. In 1185, Saladin controlled Mosul and a treaty was signed with the Byzantine Empire against their mutual enemy, the Seljuks. He could now advance through the Latin states safely, knowing that his own borders were secure. With the Franks distracted by succession conflicts and the question of who ruled the Kingdom of Jerusalem, Saladin's time to strike was now. In April 1187 the Franks' castle of Kerak was attacked, a force commanded by Saladin's son Al-Afdal moved into Acre and Saladin himself assembled a massive army consisting of troops from Egypt, Syria, Aleppo and Jazeera, northern Iraq. The Franks gathered their forces in response, and the two armies met at Hattin, the Franks on their way to Tiberias, to relieve Saladin's siege there. The Battle of Hattin began on July 3, 1187, when Saladin's mounted archers continually attacked and retreated, providing an ongoing siege to the marching Franks. As one Muslim historian put it, the arrows pierced them, turning their lions into hedgehogs. The next day, Saladin managed to place around 20,000 troops in Hattin. The Franks were under the leadership of Guido de Lusignan, king of the Kingdom of Jerusalem from 1186 to 1192, and could place around 15,000 foot soldiers and 1,300 horsemen. The Franks were outnumbered and severely out of water, while the Muslim army, with plentiful supplies thanks to their camel trains, set fire to dry grass and brush to further increase the enemy's thirst. The Franks' formation broke up with the infantry in disarray and no longer providing the usual protective ring for the heavy cavalry. A cavalry force led by Raymond of Tripoli broke through the Muslim lines, but for the remainder of the army there was no escape, and Saladin won a resounding victory against the largest army the Franks had ever mustered. In a typical magnanimous gesture, Saladin offered the now captive Guy an ice-cold sherbet. Some nobles were released with the production of a ransom, as was typical of medieval warfare, including Guy. Others were less lucky. Reynaldo of Chatillon, the Prince of Antioch, was hated for his earlier attack on a Muslim caravan, and for this he was executed, Saladin himself first striking a blow with his scimitar and cutting off one of Reynaldo's arms. The knights of the two military orders, the Knights Templar and the Knights Hospitaller, were considered too fanatical and too dangerous, as well as offering zero chance of winning any ransom, and for this they were also executed. The rest of the captives were sold into slavery. In September 1187, Jerusalem, now almost completely defenseless, was captured by Saladin. Once again, a mass massacre of the city's Christians was resisted, and most were rescued or enslaved. Eastern Christians were allowed to remain in the city, although all churches except the Holy Sepulchre were converted into mosques. Other important cities had already fallen under Saladin's rule and included Acre, Tiberias, Caesarea, Nazareth, and Jaffa. In fact, the only significant city still in Western hands in the Middle East was Tyre. With the victory at Hattin, the capture of the Franks' holiest relic, the True Cross, and the fall of the holy city of Jerusalem, Saladin's heroic status was confirmed. The Sultan was active in publicizing his reputation, even employing two official biographers to record his achievements. So, too, religious and educational institutions were supported, and his works extolled the virtues of his patron. The Sultan was known for his love of poetry, hunting, and gardens. His generosity, in particular to his relatives who ruled the provinces of his empire, was also famous. This generosity and disinterest in accumulating personal wealth is recorded by modern historian A. Malouf. Saladin had long cherished the idea of a holy war against the Christian armies of the West and would have to wage it now that he had captured Jerusalem. Pope Gregory III, 1187, called for a Third Crusade to recapture Jerusalem, and the three most powerful kings in Europe responded: Frederick I Barbarossa, King of Germany and Holy Roman Emperor from 1152 to 1190, Philip II of France, 1180 to 1223, and Richard I the Lionheart of England, 1189 to 1199. Meanwhile, Guy de Lusignan was back in the campaign. He had left Tyre with some 7,000 infantry, 400 horsemen, and a small fleet from Pisan to begin a siege of Muslim Acre in August 1189. It was the beginning of a long and arduous siege, and with Saladin's land army besieging the positions of the Muslims. Franks, only the eventual arrival of Philip and Richard's armies tipped the balance in the Crusaders' favor. The city was finally captured on July 12, 1191, and with its significantly 70 ships, most of Saladin's navy. The Crusader army then marched south towards Jerusalem with Saladin's army in pursuit as they moved along the coast. Then, a full-scale battle broke out on the plain of Arsuf on September 7, 1191. The Crusaders won, but the Muslim losses were not substantial. Saladin had no choice but to retreat to the relative safety of the forest bordering the flat land. Although neither Acre nor Arsuf did any serious damage to Saladin's army, the two defeats in quick succession, and then the loss of Jaffa to Richard I in August 1192, cumulatively damaged Saladin's military reputation and among his contemporaries. Saladin was often criticized by rival Muslim leaders for being too cautious when direct attacks on Tyre would have denied the Crusaders a crucial beachhead, and similarly for not confronting Guy's army before it even reached Acre or the Crusader army at their arrival at the siege. All these moves may have been decisive. This was, however, to criticize in hindsight and ignores what were the commonly established rules of warfare of the period across the region. Armies of any kind very rarely directly engage the enemy in open battle. Instead, control of strategically important castles and ports through siege warfare was standard practice at the time. The lack of determination to take Tyre, the last Frankish stronghold, is more difficult to defend, except that Saladin may have been wary of the arrival of Frederick I's massive army, which, in this case, never arrived, and preferred to keep faith in his tried-and-true method of wearing down the enemy at their weakest points, not their strongest. He also knew that Western kings could not remain in the East indefinitely and thus neglect their own kingdoms. Time has always been on the side of the Muslim. And, as it turned out, Saladin's approach was successful, as the Crusader army, when it reached its main objective from Jerusalem, was so exhausted and Saladin's army was still a threat that the entire crusade was abandoned in the autumn of 1192. A negotiated peace followed, but Richard I gained very little for all the effort expended in the cause, not even managing to meet his adversary face to face. Saladin was unable to profit from the Crusaders' departure because he died soon after in Damascus on March 4, 1193. He was only 55 or 56 years old and probably died at the mere physical cost of decades spent on campaign. The fragile and often volatile Muslim coalition quickly disintegrated once their great leader died. 3 of Saladin's sons took control of Egypt, Damascus, and Aleppo respectively, while other relatives and emirs fought over the remnants. Saladin left a lasting legacy in founding the Ayyubid dynasty that ruled until 1250 in Egypt and 1260 in Syria, in both cases being overthrown by the Mamluks. Saladin also left a legacy in literature, Muslim and Christian. So, tell me in the comments, what do you think of the great leader of the medieval era, Saladin? And if you haven't subscribed yet, enjoy it now, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. See you in the next video.